Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. You all are running for Portland City Council to represent District 2, North and Northeast Portland. I'm hoping each of you can take just a minute to tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're running for City Council. And we'll just kind of go in order on what's my Zoom screen. So, James, if you wouldn't mind going first.
Yeah, of course. My name is James Armstrong. I live in the Woodlawn neighborhood with my wife and two kids. When I was 28 years old, my wife and I opened Alberta Eye Care on Northeast Alberta Street. Almost 12 years later, we have three clinics spread out across District 2. I'm also a forensic accountant, which was my original career from college. And over 15 years in that industry, I've investigated fraud, misspent funds, and audited large business financials. And in a volunteer capacity, I've led the nonprofit Alberta Main Street for over 4 years, advocating for small businesses in Northeast Portland, and more recently with the St. John's Safety and Livability Committee, helping out with businesses in North Portland. When I look at this race, to me, voters aren't necessarily concerned about the direction of Portland. They're focused on implementation, communication, and accountability. When I look at my background, I think I've shown success in implementation with the businesses that we've started and grown. And I think from an accountability and communication standpoint, my work both in the community and my work as a forensic accountant have shown success in those areas. So I'm excited to be an asset to this council and discuss more things with you today.
Great, thank you. Alana, if you could go next.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Ilana Purtle-Guinea. I am a mom of two. My wife and I have lived in the Vernon neighborhood for over 16 years. I started my career in advocacy. I worked for the Oregon AFL-CIO. I did a lot of different things there, but mostly it boiled down to things, working with other groups in the community to build coalitions to make progress on policies that supported working people and helping union members learn to advocate for change in their communities. When I left the AFL-CIO, I went to work in the governor's office. I worked very briefly for Governor Kitzhaber and then for Governor Brown for most of her time in office. I did policy work, helped write budgets, and at the end of my time there, I was Governor Brown's legislative director, where I helped secure additional funding for our schools, helped pass pieces of the state's first racial justice agenda, and navigated the relationships between the legislative and executive branches during COVID. As I look at where we stand as a city right now, and the job of this new council coming in, I see two important pieces to the job. The first is the work with Portland.
I'm
Easily.
sorry. Oh, sorry, you just froze for just a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
No, I was just saying that I look at the job of this new city council and I see two pieces to it. Bringing community together and helping Portlanders navigate our city more easily than they've been able to in the past. And the work of creating this new system of government and making sure that we set it up in a way that is responsive to Portlanders and that allows us to move policy into implementation that works so we can actually make the changes that Portlanders are looking for. I've done both of those things throughout my career, and it would be an honor to get to do that work for my neighbors here in Portland.
Great, thank you. And if Tiffany, can you go next?
Hi, thank you for having us. My name is Tiffany Penson, running for City Council District 2. I was raised and I'm rooted in Northeast Portland and still live in the house that I grew up in. My father had a barbershop on Union Avenue, what is now Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, where community came and gathered and shared stories, waiting for the perfect haircut. My parents both instilled in me a sense of commitment to community and a sense of problem-solving urgency to get things done. Portland needs to just get back to delivering basic services like cleaning our streets, improving our 911 and public safety, and making our neighborhoods and business districts places where we can live, work, and play. I have the work, volunteer, and lived experience needed to get things done. As elected PCC board member, we opened the 42nd Avenue Opportunity Center on Killingsworth that connects students, employers, and the community. It will have affordable housing and daycare, which are game changers. Elected leaders can have an impact. They can implement policies to house our neighbors, make housing more affordable, improve public safety to make Portland more livable. This will be my priority as City Council. We need a Portland that works for all of us, and that is an accountable, safe, and clean Portland. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dan, can you please go next?
Absolutely. Happy Monday. I live in Arbor Lodge neighborhood with my spouse, Emotionally Reyes, and I have deep roots in District 2, 38 of my 62 years. Started elementary school at Alameda Elementary and finished high school at Roosevelt High School. Dad had a business in St. John's for 30 years. Mom went to University of Portland. It's great to be the thought of representing District 2. It makes me happy. What you get with me is experience. I'm tested. In my time in office, which is just 4 years ago, almost exactly, I'm the reason was a swing vote to stop the defunding of the police. I tackled the permitting issue head on, brought all 8 bureaus together, gave a really nice layup to Commissioner Rubio when the assignment went to her to finish the job. I also, and the reason why we have some programs now that are working to get people off the streets and into stability with Safe Rest Villages. You all know there was a lot of headwinds on that, especially from the county, because I spoke truth to power around the Housing First people that are there, and they're everywhere. And then I also passed legislation recently because of my experience with the Regional Arts and Culture Council, where for 3 years we couldn't get a financial statement. So I said, it's probably a good idea that we don't have a single source contract with them anymore, and then passed legislation recently at the City Council to ensure that from now on, you can't get money from the city unless you have recent financial statements and a board of directors, and you actually tell us what success looks like. So bringing accountability to government, I will keep earnestly serving my city and my hometown and hope to do it for another 4 years.
Great, thank you. And Nat, if you can go.
Sure. Hi, I'm Nat West. I use he, him pronouns. Most people probably know me as Reverend Nat from Reverend Nat's Hard Cider. I started that business in 2011 in my basement of this house. And about a year later, expanded it into my garage. And then over the course of 12 years, grew that to be the largest hard cider manufacturing company in Portland. And during that 12 years, we donated a lot of both cider and cash to community groups and grassroots organizations. I'd like to think that it was a long game of setting me up for where I am right now, but there was no intention along the way of getting into politics. One thing that I found as I was going through my business is that a lot of the issues that I was having were the same issues that a lot of all small businesses have in the city of Portland. We see a lot of times small businesses being forgotten. It's challenging to prove that taxpayers' money can go to small business programs and have an ROI on it. But I think there's a lot of work that we still could do. One of the final straws for me was I suffered 3 years waiting for the Bureau of Environmental Services and Portland Water Bureau to settle their disagreements. I had to negotiate an agreement between the two of them about how they wanted me to build my sewer system on a new cidery. And I'm not alone in that. Beyond the small business time, I was recently a TriMet bus driver, and that was very different from running a small business, but it was equally as fun. I loved the service of that and just providing a sort of basic piece of infrastructure in some ways to a lot of folks who expected the bus to show up roughly on time and get them where they're trying to go roughly on time. I'll bring that love of service to my work on City Council, mostly with a focus on transportation safety. With good transportation, you also get climate justice. So that's another major area of work for me. I was drawn to run in particular because the new system of government that we're setting up here has very few guidelines put in place. It's a kind of a wide open. There are single sentences in the new charter that we are going to have to create whole processes around. So I think it's really important that we elect leaders who have proven that they can create something from nothing and can do so in a very collaborative manner. So here I am, and thanks for having me today.
Great, thank you. We're just going to rotate who goes first on questions. So Ilana, if you can take this first. Tell me, what are voters in your districts telling you is the top priority, and what would you do to address it?
So when I'm canvassing, I actually ask everybody at every door I'm at if they could snap their fingers and have city council address one issue tomorrow, what would it be? And about half the time I hear about homelessness. And the other half of the time I hear a lot about housing affordability, public safety, and that kind of ethos of Portland and how we maintain that even as we work through all of the challenges that we're facing right now. It's a lot of different things. But I want to talk about housing affordability, which is one of the things I hear a lot about. And we talk a lot about subsidized apartments when we talk about housing affordability, right? That's the traditional thing you think about, which is really important. And we need a lot more of that. And we need more of that at every level that we build, at 30%, that 80%, that 120% of average median income. But we also need to make sure we're building other types of housing that are affordable, including workforce housing. And the reason I think that is so important, workforce housing are essentially your starter homes, those homes that somebody working an hourly wage can afford to buy. And I was talking to a couple of folks who work in the housing industry, the affordable housing industry, who were saying that when we don't have enough workforce housing for people to purchase who are interested in owning a home, they stay in the rental. And then that drives up prices in the rental market and backs up who can actually afford to be in the rental market without a subsidy, which then puts even more pressure on our affordable housing, our subsidized apartments as well. And we have a lot of places where it's felt like we are addressing issues, we're addressing the challenges we face in the city in one-offs, one at a time. Let's take on this issue, let's take on that issue. And until we start addressing all of our challenges, including affordable housing, looking at the whole spectrum, looking more holistically, we are going to continue playing whack-a-mole instead of having a comprehensive solution that makes sure everybody in our city can find a place to live in our city and afford to stay here.
Great, thank you. We will definitely be getting into housing a little bit more. Tiffany, if you can go next, tell me, what are voters saying is their top priority, and what would you do to address it?
So I hear again two things, and it is public safety. It is our response times. It's calling 911 and not getting somebody right away. It is calling for police to come and not having them not coming in a timely manner. And so the things that I would want to address is our public safety, our 911, fire, and police. We have to have well-resourced, well-trained, and responsive public safety. I grew up where this place was really safe. I took the bus from Concordia area all the way to Catlin Gable at 9 years old. And so I am used to a safe environment. I'm used to when you call to get help, that they're there. And that's what a lot of people are talking about, just the mere calling, getting somebody on the phone. So we need to make sure that the city is well-resourced and trained, have well-trained staff and accountable staff to meet the needs of our folks. A major part of livability is feeling safe and feeling like you have access when you need it. The other thing is when we talk about housing, we need all levels of housing. We need temporary housing. We need shelters. We need affordable housing. We need sobering centers in each quadrant of the city. When I think about housing, I think a lot about our folks, our working people and families that are either rent burden or something happens in their mortgage burden. These are some of my faculty at PCC. And so making sure that they have services and supports around them. I also think of our people on the fixed income, retired, fixed income, people with disabilities. Those are the fastest moving demographics to the streets. And so we can further invest in organizations that provide wraparound services to support them when they need it.
Great, thank you. Dan, how about you? What are you hearing from voters?
The big picture on that is people are upset that their invoices keep going up to live here and their services keep going down. It's a really bad equation. We've seen population loss for the first time in our city the last 4 years. That the last time that happened was during the logging bust in the early 80s, that transformation. And this time it's not about the economy, it's about livability. So what I keep hearing from people is that big picture category. Underneath that is we're not addressing this drug crisis with the type of response it deserves. And there's a lot of frustration around that, especially people like me in recovery and others in recovery are speaking wisdom to this. This whole deflection idea, I don't know where that came. I think that came from Salem, and we're trying to implement a flawed concept. What we need are withdrawal sobering centers that are medically staffed so people can go through that excruciating necessary process and then have enough capacity to make a decision about recovery. And so I will continue to hammer on that. What I'm also hearing from people around basic safety is that freedom to just go on a walk. When are we going to be as compassionate about the elder who doesn't feel comfortable going on a walk in Old Town, the mother that doesn't feel comfortable to take her 2 kids into the park because it used to be needles, now it's foil everywhere. They're smelling things they know is harmful. It's just not okay. We can't keep tolerating the intolerable and say that's compassionate. We have to have compassion that also has some tough love. So we start to see some results. This is a really big issue. From there, it goes into public safety. It goes into homelessness. People who are homeless because of economic reasons, we have pathways for them to get into workforce, into housing, back into stability. But we haven't figured out what to do with this growing drug crisis that's been harming our city. And it's going to take us down, just like it does families that are impacted by drug addiction. So it's like we have a city that hasn't accepted recovery. I wish we'd at least get to the first step and stop denying the problem, admit we're powerless, surrender, and show up with some humility, check the egos at the door, and really work on this issue. And I'm looking forward to being a strong voice I will continue to be that until we can get the county on a common sense page.
Great, thank you. Nat, what are voters telling you?
I like going like third or fourth on this question because they're telling me the same things they're telling my colleagues here who are also running. So I'll take a slightly different tack on this question. And I think it's something that's the third priority listed on my website is creating a functioning council from scratch. I touched on it in my opening, but it doesn't really matter if any one of us gets elected, any handful of us, or any particular topics that we want to address rapidly, if we're not able to do so in a collaborative and very fast way. I'm kind of on the edge of, is it more important to do my things or to do things, period? If we're not able to get stuff done, we're not going to be able to solve any of these problems that we all hear when we're out knocking on doors and talking to voters. You know, I realized this early on before I declared my candidacy, and I decided that I was going to try to create a collaborative council during the campaigning process. So I've done a lot of shared events. Just last night, I picked up at an event that I had 4 other counselors, Ilana was one of them, council candidates. I gave them an event. I set it up for them and let them run it. And I wasn't even there to meet voters. So I'm looking forward to doing more of that work as the campaign continues. And I know that the work that I've done will make for a stronger council, a more cohesive council on January 2nd, whether I'm elected or not.
Great, thank you. And James, same question for you. What are you hearing from voters?
So I do have this odd kind of unique thing where when people are talking to me, they hear the word forensic accountant and they immediately, their eyes lighten up and they go, I want you to tell me exactly where my tax money is going, which of course I don't necessarily have the answer to being outside, but it's pretty remarkable how many people seem really frustrated with, I think, as Commissioner Ryan mentioned, the level of service to the level of the invoice. To me, I've been spending a lot of time in North Portland, specifically at the neighborhood level. So when I look at the level of services people are looking for, it's whether or not their park has a functioning bathroom. It's whether or not, obviously the pool situation happening with Columbian and Pier Park, it's the deferred maintenance. It's a lot of these issues that really, when they step outside of Portland, maybe they're in Tigard or Hillsborough, up in dreaded Clark County, they're seeing these services and they're going, why can't we have that? Why shouldn't I expect to have the same level of service? So I hear that. I definitely hear, obviously, a lot of the issues around housing, homelessness, addiction. I've heard a lot of conversations that kind of um, go beyond kind of the typical conversation that we, I think, have at the politician level. And you hear a lot more about kind of, I don't feel safe going down my street. I'm concerned if I have a medical emergency, how long is 911 going to take to get to my house? And it actually is really eye-opening to hear people's personal experience when you are used to dealing with it kind of at the high level. And it really helps you focus on the need to get some action done.
Thank you. Okay, so I am going to be a little stricter in terms of keeping people, let's say, to no more than a minute on some of these questions, just because I want to be able to get through as much as possible. And Tiffany, you'll be first on this question. There's a lot of controversy over the city's anti-camping ban, and I'm curious if that is an ordinance that you support or if you would seek to amend or repeal it in any way.
I support the camping ban.
Okay, great, thank you. And as part of that, do you have any thoughts regarding the enforcement of it? There was, the sheriff initially refused to book anyone who was arrested on those charges. What would you do if on city council to ensure enforcement, or would you want to pull back on jailing?
So when I think about camping, the reason why I didn't see it growing up is because it was illegal to camp. So I did not see that. What we need to be focusing on is making sure that people have the infrastructure and access to the resources needed to help them. It is inhumane to live on the street. We're not doing the most vulnerable, we're doing them a disservice, and we're also doing the rest of the community a disservice. It's our responsibility from just a humanity standpoint to ensure that we take care of our people. Your city is only as sustainable as its people, and we need to be really focused on making sure they have access to that. We also have the accountability piece. We have to hold people accountable if they are not willing to take advantage of that access. So I'm experienced enough to know that two things can be true at the same time.
Thank you. Dan, I think I know the answer to the first question, but if you can talk about just the anti-camping ordinance and thoughts on enforcement.
Yeah, it was a necessary step. I was proud to be a part of the thoughts that went into getting it passed and, of course, supporting it. I think that this is an example of having some compassion for the businesses that, especially like the inner east side out in St. John's. I've had dialogue over the last 4 years where there's just the relentless people who are camping and doing whatever they want in front of their businesses that deters people from coming in. And that's not okay. And so it's really about listening to the people who are handicapped that tell me they can't navigate sidewalks. And so we had to do something. The key thing here is, and where I think the county has been really slow, is that when we look at people who are service resistant, we accept that they're service resistant, we give them water and ask if they're okay, and then we move on. People see that behavior coming from the outreach teams and they ask, do they care about us, the people who are paying taxes, that actually just assume and expect that our sidewalks would be clear when we're running during business operations? So it was about time we did see those people. I think that it allows us to really push harder on asking for not telling them what their choices are for what the next steps are, and then enforcing that. We just can't continue to be in this enabling space that we've been in for the last 6 years.
Great, thank you. Nat, your thoughts on the anti-camping ordinance and enforcement?
Sure, I would have voted yes for it, but I think there's a fundamental sort of flipping of the actions that we should be taking here, similar to the way that Measure 110 implemented half of it and not the half that we all thought we were getting. When someone is being forced by the police or someone else to not camp in a public space, there's a legitimate question of where should I go? Whether you choose to have a moral stance on it or not is I'm not really commenting on that, but I'll comment on the cost of it. The cost of booking someone, sending them to jail, whether they stay the night or not, or whether they're just booked and released, occupying court time, finding public defenders, finding prosecutors, et cetera. It's just the worst way to spend our money. So we've always had time, place, and manner restrictions. You can't camp on my front lawn. You can't camp in the middle of the road. So I'm always open to adjusting how we're restricting time, place, and manner camping. But I want to make sure we're doing so with the best use of taxpayers' dollars.
So what would that be?
So one of the great success that Washington County has had was first creating shelters, making sure there were sufficient shelter beds, and then essentially sweeping people into shelters. If you're just sweeping someone, you're just taking your problem and pushing into someone else's backyard. And I'm a YIMBY everywhere I go. I don't like just sweeps without having some place for them to go first.
Okay. And so that would be like, for instance, more task sites or safe rest villages?
Correct. Shelters
Okay.
of all kinds, whether it's designated camping or something more permanent.
Great, thank you. James, same question for you. I guess, what were your thoughts on the anti-camping ordinance?
Yeah, my thoughts on the camping ordinance was that it was a necessary step to give you know, our city just the tools to start moving forward. I think one of the issues we run into with this is we don't really have good information on who the individuals are that are not willing to take service. We have individuals that need help. We know how to get them help. We have individuals that basically can accept help, whether it's through addiction or behavioral health. We know that the county is trying to hopefully come up with those resources, but they haven't. And then we have the individuals that will not accept help. And we really had a hard time. I think some people running for office think that could be upwards of 40-50% of the people on the street. Some people running for office think that's closer to 5-10%. And we seem to not be able to get a good answer for what that number is. So I think what I've pushed for and what I think is the necessary step Portland needs to take is a little bit more of a larger scale solution to this problem. I think the joint office should get out of their remote work and create a headquarters that's located somewhere that has the ability to take in a much larger scale of individuals, similar to what was looked at in 2016, but passed on the San Antonio model. I actually traveled out there and toured Haven for Hope in the last few months. And what they've done in the 8 years since we passed on that model is very impressive. And we should be jealous of the amount of people they're able to serve in a trauma-informed way that's reduced unsanctioned camping in their downtown, and it's just been an absolute success. So that's kind of where I lean on these issues.
Great, thank you. And Ilana, your thoughts on the anti-camping ordinance?
Yeah, so to your first question, support, oppose, or amend, I would have asked to amend it. I think that the city is taking the right approach at this point, and I would have liked to see it made a little bit narrower. And here's why. We can't arrest our way out of homelessness. We can't fine our way out of homelessness. The only enforcement tools that we have right now leave people homeless and actually less able to become stable when they decide to accept services, because they either have a record or they have debt because of having been homeless. So when I look at the possibility of enforcement, because that's what a ban comes down to, is, do you think people will accept whatever you're offering instead? And if not, are you willing to enforce it? Enforcement, the place people are camping has to be problematic enough that it is worth making our homeless crisis harder to solve in the long run by saddling people with a criminal record or debt if they're unwilling to take services. So we absolutely need more places for people to go, including the task sites and shelters, also including sober housing, because we don't have enough space right now for folks who are sober and aren't able to go to a shelter that would threaten their sobriety. We need to make sure we have more places for people to go, narrow that camping ban just a little bit to make sure that if we are moving somebody along through an arrest, it is worth the cost, because it will be a cost to our city to get that person housed eventually, that it's worth the cost of the added difficulty to get them housed and stable and back on their feet.
How would you build that into an ordinance? I guess I'm wondering, how would you, because from what I understand,
Yeah, I wouldn't put that cost benefit in the ordinance, but that's what I would think about when I was writing the ordinance, when I was thinking about how do we narrow it. There's some cases where very clearly we need to say people can't camp. Safe routes to school, right? Those designated routes where kids are getting to schools. Absolutely, we should not have camping on safe routes to schools. But again, as a policymaker, thinking broadly about what policy in the long run best serves our community and what policies in the long run actually make it harder for us to address our challenges, I want to make sure that that ordinance is specifically designated toward those spaces where it is so important to make sure folks aren't camping that it is worth the added time and cost to get an individual who's currently houseless stabilized before we say we're going to sweep them.
Great, thank you. Dan, I think you go first on this question. Without saying permitting, because I think everyone knows and agrees that permitting has been a problem for decades. Can you tell me what levers you would pull to accelerate housing production or increase the housing supply? And if you have something very specific with permitting, you can go there, but ideally, I would love to hear some new thoughts on that.
Yes. Well, currently permitting wait times aren't the issue because there's hardly anyone signing up to do any building. So we have to look, why are we currently not attracting investments for housing? And that's the real story. And the story is actually connected to what was said earlier around livability, about the conditions on our streets. It's hard when you're putting in major developments for housing, especially in the private sector. You have to have investments. And those investors, when they come visit the city, their reputation lens before they even come, sadly, is already tarnished. And then sometimes when they visit, it gets worse. And so it's so important that we actually attract investments again so we can do some more building. We can build our way out of this, but we've been short on units built for some time. And I know the governor, everyone's saying they want that. So we have to make Portland's reputation improve so that people want to invest and build more housing in Portland again. I think that's actually the key at the moment. I've never seen anything quite like it in terms of how it plummeted to no one really wanting to build at the city.
Thank you. Nat, what levers would you pull on housing? And I know you had a personal experience with permitting. So if there's something specific about that you want to pull out, feel free. You're on mute. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, so that permit hell that I experienced was the fact that the Water Bureau and the Bureau of Environmental Services weren't on the same page. So I'm really looking forward to the changes of the government structure. I think the removal of the commission form of government and to an administrator will really help, because a single administrator, in this case, the Administrator of Public Works, would have been able to solve the problem rather than me having to elevate it to the city ombudsman. I even got Congressman Blumenauer involved, just hoping he could pull some strings in City Hall. So that's obviously a place we should never go back to in Portland. But I think beyond permitting, I'd like to make sure that we're right sizing our system development charges. There is conversations amongst business community about adjusting SDCs so that they can accelerate permits. Maybe we should be looking at having SDCs, calculating SDCs in a different way rather than the old way of percentage of the total build. Maybe we should be looking at doing them for housing specific SDCs versus commercial building SDCs. I also am really big on zoning, so making sure that we can create more density, because density oftentimes lowers the cost per unit, which will make it more desirable for a builder to build in any given area. The zoning laws that we have right now, the zoning map is kind of strange. When you look at a single block, on one corner of the block, it'll be 75 feet, and another corner, it'll be 250 feet. And there's a lot of work that we can do on that. I'm a big fan of the Inner East Side for All campaign. Portland Neighbors Welcome got their endorsement, as well as an endorsement of Home Pack. So.
Great, thank you. James, what are your thoughts on housing? What levers would you pull?
Yeah, and I'm going to apologize to Tiffany because I saw that we both actually had this in our Oregonian answers. But I was on the phone, had a call with a county commissioner from Montgomery County, Maryland, about their low interest loan program that they've set up to try to spur housing development. I think when what Commissioner Ryan mentioned, the lack of private investment that's happening in our city is real. Also, the increase of interest rates just across the board has created an issue. I think there's a big opportunity right now where the city can step in and create a revolving fund to really tackle that first step of construction, the kind of the hardest part to get financing, the construction loan process. We can still utilize the private market, private developers, private builders, but what we don't have to give up is the equity. So that allows us to maintain equity so that we're not worrying about inclusionary zoning. You know, there are properties, if we want to have a certain affordable mix that makes sense, we can do that. If we want to bring in workforce housing, and we can really start spurring development around our transportation corridor, as has been successful in some other cities across the country, and we can start building quickly.
Great, thank you. Ilana, what are your thoughts in terms of housing and how to spur more development?
Yeah, so a couple of things, and I apologize, I am going to say the word permitting, but I'm not going to start there. Commissioner Ryan is absolutely right. We have a capital problem. And one of the things that we have struggled with in Portland and actually across the whole state for a long time is that we don't have enough local capital to support the investments that we need in our community. We just don't have as many very, very wealthy people, very, very large corporations to have the type of capital that some other metropolitan areas do. And I would like council or the mayor to have a conversation with some of the folks who could provide capital locally to see what it would take to get them to invest in our community, because the bar for folks who are a part of our community to invest is sometimes lower than the bar for folks who are outside of our community. I think we need to do a lot of relationship building there, though, because those are the same people who are frustrated with the lack of services and with the condition our city has been in over the last couple of years. And the second thing I would do, and I apologize, but I am going to say permitting here, is make sure we have stable funding so that for our permitting department, so that we don't have these ebbs and flows that make it so that sometimes when we need staff the most, we have the least people working in that department, because right now we are solely funded through fees, which means that right now we're getting fewer fees in, right? When we have more people ready to build, we're going to have a lower budget there. So we need to stabilize the budget for our permitting department. And I have had a lot of conversations with local builders about what having navigators within our permitting department would do to help, so that you, as somebody bringing a project forward, everything from a small remodel in your house to a multi-block large development, would have a single person assigned to your application who would help see it through the process. And they would have been able to flag for Nat early on in the process that there would be a conflict, so that working through that could start as soon as possible. They might be able to compress some of the timelines by saying, no, this is an application where we're not going to run into problems. Things can work concurrently. And having that single navigator who then, for developers, is assigned to their work every time, so you know who you're working with. I've been told by multiple folks who work on development in our city that they think that could cut development times when permitting times are a problem by 20 to 30%, which can make a huge difference.
Great, thank you. And Tiffany, how about you? What are your thoughts in terms of encouraging more housing development?
So the first thing that we really need to do, and the reason why we're seeing this as an issue of people not wanting to invest in us, is because we need to start delivering on the basic services. We need to really address our issues of cleaning up unsafe and unsanitary conditions. We need to address our issues around public safety, ensuring that there are good response times. We just need to deliver on the basic services. That is first and foremost. And that's why people are leaving. That's why people are frustrated, because they can't see where their dollars are going to really solve issues and just deliver on the basic services, which is how I grew up. We delivered on the basic services. I started my career in the Bureau of Development Services, so I have a lot of knowledge around the permitting system.
To try
And
to
so
reduce climate change, or to be.
Hang on, Jamie.
I just muted her.
Okay.
Sorry, Tiffany, go ahead.
Okay, so and I understand a little more in depthly around the shortfalls and and just the challenges around permitting. One of the things that I think that would be a great opportunity there is a field issuance remodel program, and that is, Alana, really kind of what you're leading to. It's something that's already in existence. And it's when you have a point of contact to help you through the whole process. And it is literally just for residential right now, but we can expand that to commercial. It is awesome. You pay probably a little bit more, but you have one-stop shopping. And so you have somebody that from the point of entry all the way through that watches your program, your project. And this is an opportunity to expand that. It is a game changer, and we can do that. So I'm just going to leave it there.
And Nat, did you want to jump in real quick?
Yeah, I just want to mention that a lot of the stuff that we are all talking about, I agree with, we're all on the same page here, is sort of more quantitative. But there's a big question about if I'm going to build a project in Scottsdale or in Portland, how does the vibes feel? And vibes are not necessarily like permitting timelines and costs and things. They can be like, what is the media saying about Portland? Have I read interesting articles about Portland? So this concept of Portland having sort of a marketing problem is something that we should also really consider as we're thinking about attracting builders to work here in Portland.
Thank you. And actually, Nat, you're first to go on this next question. What should be the next iteration of Portland Street Response? What should it look like? What should it be? Should be its responsibilities? Anything that you can kind of do to flesh that out?
Sure. Funding is the big one. We're still not operating 24/7. I look at a lot of things in the city as a cost question, and there's a really slightly unfair and very crude cost comparison that you can do on the budget of PSR and the number of calls, and the budget of the Portland Police Bureau, the number of calls, and it's something like 100 to 1 or 1 to 100 the cost. Not to say that a PSR van should show up everywhere that a PPB van is a cruiser is showing up, but also something like 99.6% of all police calls do not result in a use of force. Excuse me. So obviously we want that number to be great. We want there to be almost no use of force, and we want to reserve our officers for times when a use of force is required or likely to be required. But clearly we're sending them places where use of force is rarely needed. So you can look at the value of PSR just from a cost perspective and want to fund it more. I think there should also be a third person operating in each PSR vehicle and each PSR team, and that is a peer specialist, someone who's certified in dealing with the kinds of issues, lived experience that they're seeing their calls go to most often. So I got a lot more ideas about PSR, but there's 5 other people here. So
that would be a significant increase in investment, even just like with the current number of teams, because you would want to add a third person.
Sure, I don't know what percentage of PSR's budget is labor versus other things. So it's sure, and it's a lot of dollars, but I don't know how it's going to affect the budget overall.
Okay, and why 24/7?
Things happen all the time. They happen both all the time, but also by having staff to run 24/7, it gives you more coverage during those peak hours. I don't know where PSR's peak times are, but I know that, for instance, Portland Fire and Rescue's peak times are oftentimes in like the PM rush hour. So I think you can get a lot of more coverage to be able to respond to more calls, not during normal operating hours, not just at 2 or 3 a.m.
Thank you. James, what are your thoughts in terms of the next iteration of Portland Street Response?
Yeah, I think I've kind of painted myself into no man's land with when I discuss PSR, because what I've put out there is that I actually think that PSR should be moved to join up with the Portland Police Bureau. And I think when we hear the discussion, it's either what we've seen kind of currently left out to dry with the Fire Bureau, or that it should be its own completely separate initiative. And I think, where I'm coming from when I say this is based on some experience I've had both as a small business owner in St. John's. We are frequently making phone calls for incidents that are happening in our region, and often they're a gray area. So someone's having a behavioral health issue, they're yelling, they're screaming, but they have scissors in their hand. Well, if they have scissors, that's police. If they're threatening to cause violence, that's police. And yet we're getting no specific behavioral health. We're not getting Portland street response out. Prior to COVID, I actually had a family member, a close family member here in Portland that was a behavioral health trauma-informed specialist, and she was working with Project Respond, and she was on a 24-hour on-call unit that would get called by the Portland police in the middle of the night if they were dealing with someone that was in crisis. And to me, you know, when we're looking at what we need to get this up and running. It's been 8 years since we've started this pilot program, and yet we're still dealing with the same issues on the street. And for me, it seems like a fantastic opportunity. Sorry, Dan, 4 years, that's fine. It seems like a fantastic opportunity for the Portland police to say, yes, give us Portland street response. We hear you, Portland. We know our reputation in the city, and we know we need to repair that reputation. Give it to us, and we will make it the successful program that you want. And I guess what I would say to those that really don't want to see it with the police is, if it can be its complete success within the police, is that okay? And to me, it has to be. That seems to be the most efficient and most effective way forward.
How would you manage that culture clash, though? Because there has been some friction between Portland Police and PSR.
I mean, I think it starts with leadership. I mean, I've heard Chief Day speak about this idea, and I think he speaks in a very motivating and leadership forum. I think it's you know, I've met so many police officers over the year, and I will agree. Some of them fit the tough on crime kind of mentality, and some are social workers with badges that are out there in their community. I think we need to build Portland's police to be the version of public safety that we want. And I think this is a perfect step. If they're integrated with Portland Street Response, they're going to be integrated with people maybe that have a little bit different of a mindset that they're used to. And maybe that'll start breaking down the cultural issues that we're seeing in our Portland police. So I think it's an opportunity for leadership. I don't think anything is going to be easy, but I don't understand why we won't try these big kind of paradigm shifting changes.
Great, thank you. Ilana, what would be your vision for the next iteration of PSR?
So I think investments in Portland Street Response are also direct investments in increasing public safety broadly in our city. Because if we can separate out the work of, I'm going to go in the opposite direction of James, police and Portland Street Response. And if we can start to think about Portland Street Response as the lead entity on a group of entities that respond when somebody is in crisis, including Project Respond and others, in the same way that we have groups that work across city and county to respond to a health crisis, right? We have fire and we have ambulance that respond jointly. If we had something similar when somebody is in crisis, we could free up police time to be responding when there's a crime, to be responding when a small business has a need, to be investigating crimes so we can increase our case closure rates. So I think these things are all directly connected. And I do think that we need to invest further in Portland Street Response. I don't think we can get to 24/7 immediately, but I want to just jump in on that because you asked Nat why. If we have coverage 24/7 by Portland Street Response, we can actually bill the feds for some of that work. We can get Medicaid dollars for reimbursing some of their work, which would help offset some of that additional cost. Again, I don't think we can get there immediately, but I do think we need to be looking in that direction. I also think it's really,
go ahead.
I think it's really important to make sure we have the right providers. I was talking to another candidate who said, well, Portland Street Response isn't any good because they can't transport people. They can't go inside a building. They can't. Well, those are policy decisions. And if we make sure that we have appropriate healthcare providers, maybe not on every unit, because that would be a significant additional cost, but on some of those units so that they can respond. And if we change the policy to say, yes, you can go in to private property if you have been invited in by the property owner or the business owner there. Yes, you do have the appropriate providers to be able to transport somebody so that if somebody is in crisis but is willing to accept help beyond what you can give them on the street, you can get them to the right place. If we made those policy changes, Portland Street Response could do a lot more and could offset a lot more of the work, again, freeing up police to work on the things that I think most people in our community agree we want police responding to and working on.
And so you would expand kind of what would be allowable. So for instance, someone who might have a weapon or someone who might be suicidal?
I think those are two very different things. Somebody who is suicidal but is not threatening harm to other people, we should have the appropriate providers with Portland Street Response to be able to respond to that. Somebody who is threatening other people, we may need somebody there with a badge and handcuffs and a gun, in which case that is an appropriate police response. And we may have calls where we need both to respond together. And I know that there has been times where that happens and times where there's a lot of resistance to that. But if we can separate out these two programs so that they are autonomous programs working on different responses, and they're able to feel secure as different response types, then when we do need a joint response, just like we sometimes have joint response between fire and police right now, this can be a joint response that's not about who is more important, but that is about needing both responders on the job. And that's a culture change. That's not something we can do through policy, but we can set policy up in a way that helps us get to a point where, frankly, we make the expectation clear to managers in both programs that we need that culture change.
Great, thank you. Tiffany, what's your vision for PSR?
So PSR was originally designed to have trained clinicians in mental health and drug addiction, and also to be able to transport people. Currently, it is not meeting its original intent. So we need to address that. Another thing is PSR should be under the public safety service area. It is about public safety. And so what we need there, which we have 911, fire, police, PSR should be in that same family. What we really need is collaboration and conversation between all the public safety bureaus to really define the roles, right? They need to be working together. And so the issue that I see is that they have not been brought together, all the public safety bureaus, to even discuss what their role is, be clear on their role is, and how do they partner. But it should be a part of the public safety service area. I am of the vein that I would like things to work better before expanding it. I would like us to make sure we know the roles, make sure that everybody is partnering as they should be before we talk about expanding resources. It's not even working as it was designed originally. So we can address that. And we need to address the policy and the barriers that are in our way from being able to actually take someone who is in crisis and transport them to get help if they choose. When you're in crisis and calling a few numbers and then leaving you with a list to call on your own, that's not even real. You can't even think. You need the help. So I would like to focus on what the original intent is, and let's solve for that. Let's get all of our public safety partners talking together so that they can roll this out in a collaborative way and a sustainable way.
Thank you very much. And Dan, what are your thoughts about the next iteration of PSR?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts. Portlanders deserve, first of all, the North Star is the best first response system in the country, and we don't have it right now. I think we need a reset, and I've said this to everyone in the system, in the public safety system at the city. It was rolled out, let's be honest, it was rolled out as an antithesis to police. So police are bad, Portland Street Response is good, and it was set up that way politically, and that's got to stop. And so that, unfortunately, is a part of the culture right now. And so whether it's police, fire, chat division within it, Portland Street Response, the park rangers, Project Respond, sheriff, those are our first response system in our marketplace. And so 911, working with the leadership named Mike Myers, who's the DCA for public safety, we've had this conversation. So it's like, how do we press that reset? So when you have someone that is requesting trauma-informed response, then Portland Street Respond could come, but they say they look like they're in a situation that needs a backup. So you'd have maybe police nearby, coordinating, talking to one another, get on the same team. That's why it's been clunky, is because it wasn't built to be a collaborative process. And so we have to go back, again, check the egos at the door. What does success look like? All of you are public servants. Your customer are the people who live and visit here. How can we improve this system? But right now, we don't have that coordination, and that's what's lacking. So I look forward to pressing the restart. I look forward to keeping Mike Myers in that job, who I think has a lot of wisdom about this, and it's go time. But we really did roll it out in a way that wasn't successful.
Great, thank
So
you
I
very
don't want to
much.
expand it until we test what success looks like, measure that, and then ripple it out as we actually have a functioning system that's getting the results Portlanders deserve.
Great, thank you very much. James, you're first on this question. The city's revenue streams are just messed up. You don't have enough money for the billions of dollars of backlog maintenance for streets. You don't have enough for the hundreds of millions of parks maintenance. You don't have enough, as Ilana pointed out, just the BDS permit inspectors depends on permit fees. What would you do? How would you address kind of this crazy patchwork of not enough money?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel it's one of those ones when you're an outsider to government, it's easy to throw stones at the glass house without actually understanding the hard work that's happening inside. I've done, obviously in my career, generally what we do is we come into businesses that have, failed because the CEO was stealing money or some sort of mismanagement, and it's our job to figure out as quickly as possible what's going on, how the business was supposed to run, so that we can figure out the correct way to go forward. When I look at some of the way Portland has done things in the past is, we kind of get the next shiny object and we fund that via ballot measure without really taking a look at some of the structural issues that exist from a long-term standpoint in our funding. So I want to get in. I don't want to look at kind of short-term funding fixes. I want to look at long-term structural funding fixes. One thing that stood out to me when I was reviewing the budgets for the last 5 years, granted, this is purely from an outsider's perspective, but is looking at how the contingency rolls and how those funds continue to get unspent year after year. I've seen some analysis just on a specific bureau level. There's some individuals in North Portland that have kind of dug into funds that were tagged to Pier Park and how year after year they kind of go unspent. I want to understand a little bit more about that so we can determine, is our contingency really something that needs to be staying the way it is? Or can we start siphoning off some of those dollars for some of the construction-ready deferred maintenance projects that we all agree? So it's an interesting subject for me. It's definitely something I think I have the background in, but I hate making large-scale proclamations when I don't have all the answers. So I'm really excited to get in there and start doing the work.
You mentioned ballot measures. Certainly PSEF has been a surprise recipient of many millions more than expected, hundreds of millions more. Is that something that you think the city should be looking at using in some fashion, or what are your thoughts about just the uses of it so far?
Yeah, no, the way I answered with your questions originally, I think the way that Commissioner Rubio has handled it, where there are so many projects within our current city budget that I think fit the general spirit of PSEF, and as long as everyone's in agreement that we can use those funds to move our city forward, then I support that completely. I think that's a good use of funds.
Thank you. Ilana, same question for you. Any thoughts or approaches you would take to addressing the messed up revenue streams that the city relies on for basic functions?
Yeah, and I want to put a finer point on that, because not only are they messed up revenue streams, but we are going to have a whole new council, probably where a majority of the council has never worked on writing a public budget before, coming into a cuts budget scenario and getting budget proposals to look at a month and a half, maybe 2 months, I think about a month and a half after being seated in office. So this is a really important question for us to all dig into. And when I've worked on public budgets in the past, there are 3 things that I think rise to the top in terms of what do we prioritize And then from there, we can figure out what else we can do. Just as a side note to your question, what do we do with these revenue streams and kind of the messiness of them? For the first time, we are going to have committee hearings where we can talk to bureau directors around accountability for results. And my hope is that a year or so into this process, we can have a better sense of where we might be able to make some efficiencies and where we might need some additional investments. But I don't know that any of us, other than perhaps Commissioner Ryan, who's worked on these budgets as a commissioner before, can answer that question today. So when I look at public budgets, the first thing I look at is what are those programs that save us money in the long run? At the state, it was things like investment in family preservation that we know saves dividends in the long run. In your family budget, it's things like maintenance that you know saves you money in the long run. At the city, in fact, probably we should have been investing more in maintenance all of these years to save us money in the long run. So what are those things that we need to invest in so that we don't exacerbate our budget problems down the road? The second thing I look at in terms of what do we prioritize is basic services. What are the things that we have to provide because nobody else can, and we need them to have a sustainable community, things like public safety and our sewer and water systems. And then the third thing I look at is what are those things specifically this time around? It's a brand new council that will show Portlanders that we can actually work together and get the job done for them, and that show Portlanders that our city is a place that is worth them investing in, right? Because that's what their tax dollars are. They're an investment in our city. And we need to stop the tide of folks leaving our city. So what are those things that Portlanders are expecting to see to show that we can work together? That's what I would prioritize the budget around year one. And then I think we need to spend a lot of time over our first year digging in on accountability with our bureaus so that we can have a better sense of where there's some room for efficiency and where we could actually be more effective by investing a little bit more.
Great, thank you. Tiffany, what are your thoughts about addressing some of the revenue issues with the budget?
So I come from the vein of there's always enough money. There is enough money in the budget right now. What it is who has the political will to do what needs to be done with the money. And right now we are not delivering on basic services. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say we don't need another dime right now. We need to just decide what is important and what the taxpayers are saying to us. You are not delivering on basic services. You are not maintaining the streets. You are not making sure that there is a well-resourced and accountable and responsive 911, a public safety system. They have told us. And being born and raised and rooted, I grew up where the streets were paved on a regular basis. When you called for help, help came. It was clean, all of these things. And so what happens over the course of the years, my thought process is around maintenance. We used to have a budget that took care of maintenance. So where did that money get reallocated to? If you look at the history, the money has been, for the most part, reallocated to do other things over courses of time, like just administration over administration. And the reason why we saw a well-kept, maintained city is because we were using the money that was collected to do the things that we needed for those things. There's also things that come along as like one-time funding. And sometimes we set up programs or things with one-time funding. Sometimes that's not sustainable because you need longer than that to solve for whatever the issue is. When I think about the budget and being that I have to go over the budget a lot because I have a team, when I think about the budget, the one thing I'm always like, God, I wish we could do the budget differently. We have a spring and a fall bump. And the purpose of that is to recenter, recalibrate, and see where you are. But also for PCC, we do a biennium budget, right? And then we set aside contingency dollars in case things come up. I think there's a better way for us to do our budget that really allows us to address issues and plan. And so
Okay, and
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I'm just wondering, what would you cut? Like you were talking about, we have enough money. It's just sort of like, and so I guess I'm wondering what would you shift around?
So first of all, the basic services that we're responsible for delivering on, right? And so we're responsible for our public safety. We're responsible for the maintaining of the roads. We're responsible to deliver good water and sewer. Those things that we are responsible for, we're responsible for parks. We're responsible for them for parks to make sure that they can have their swimming pools and their bathrooms and all the things that make our city beautiful and livable. We need to focus on delivering on those things.
But
And
to
so
do that, you have to then
you
take
have to
money.
cut. And so we have, and we also, one thing, and I am a firm believer in a great multimodal system, right? Because that's part of the livability of the city. But I do think about what are some things that, so when we think about making sure there's good bike, pedestrian, car, all of those things, well, you know what all of those things use? They use the roads. We need to make sure the roads are paved and safe for all of those multimodal ways of transportation to access the roads. So before we do any more expanding on those things, we need to make sure that there are safe roads, there are well-lit corners where people cross the street. Those are basic services.
Great, thank you. Dan, what are your thoughts in terms of how to address some of the revenue issues that the city's facing?
Well, and to touch on that was connected to the routine maintenance, correct? Or what I want to say is when we pass going forward, I will not allow a capital bond campaign to go to the voters unless we have line items that are really crystal clear about routine maintenance. We need that type of discipline written into the law, if you will. So when the voters vote on that, they know that we have that written into the plan. SDCs are something that's drove me nuts a bit. When I had the parks assignment for a mere 18 months and I couldn't understand why every day another shoe was dropping, almost like they were glamorizing the deferred maintenance, I became confused. Like, why can't we use our SDCs on really expensive deferred maintenance? When I need a new roof on my house, which I actually do right now, that's a big lift. And I don't see that as routine maintenance. I see that as a major capital project. And so instead of SDCs only going, system development charges only going for something new that will require more routine maintenance, why can't we use those funds to do that deferred maintenance that's very critical to our infrastructure? It is a legislative priority. All the council has been talking about this. And so I look forward to the new council being on board to make this another one of our legislative agendas. I think that PBOT's a really good example, Helen. When you surveyed the public about what their needs were, the public said, we want more maintenance. We want our roads fixed. There's too many potholes. And when you ask the advisors and the commissions that are in PBOT, which are mostly from the nonprofits, they all wanted more planning. Well, I think it's what the public is saying is they want routine maintenance. They want us to focus on the basics. And we might have to eliminate some of the exciting bells and whistles and planning and visioning and actually take care of business first so people feel safe and secure in their hometown. If you want me to address any of the PSEF question earlier, I'll do that.
Sure, that'd be great.
I think Commissioner Rubio's done a good job of meeting the edges of the different lobbies, if you will, on this and move the ball down the field. I have talked to her about the thought that we need to expand it beyond just city bureaus for infrastructure, which is critically important with extreme weather, of course. But it's also important that we consider with all this largesse that we didn't know we were going to have, we can't keep building more gardens in East County to be, they just won't, we won't be able to expend it fast enough. So what are some ideas? Well, when I see organics farming in Milwaukee in a warehouse, why can't we do that for small business incubation and innovation? Why can't we consider the batteries that are necessary so that the electrification actually has a renewable side to it that's clean and efficient? So it's an opportunity to have some research and development money and partner with the business, with the private sector as well, so that we can incubate our economy. The goal is about clean air. The goal is about innovative green economy. Portland talks a good game about the green economy. Let's actually do something about it instead of planning. Let's actually show that we have the chutzpah to actually have the delivery of those services and the innovation that comes from Portland, Oregon.
Great, thank you. And Tiffany, did you want to jump in real quick, and then we'll go to Nat?
Yeah, really quick around PSEF and just following up on that. And I think, though, it's really important to focus on the categories that the voters have voted in to how we spend that money. And anything different than that, we need to decide as a collective. That means all the stakeholders to take back before a new vote. I really want to focus on the 10 topic areas that our constituents voted in, and let's use that money for that.
Thank you. I'd say I would like to, okay, if you can make it really quick, I think Ilana first and then Dan, but super quick.
Thanks. And I didn't respond to the PSEF piece, and I apologize.
That's okay. I kind of tacked that on.
I agree with Tiffany that we need to make sure that anything we do is in line with what voters passed. But there's also a huge opportunity here. I think PSEF actually provides the greatest opportunity we have right now to really define who we are as a city moving forward and what we want our future to look like. There were line items in there around good jobs, around sustainability, around decarbonization. And we have empty industrial sites in Portland. We have a manufacturing innovation center just up the river from us in Scappoose. We have a university right downtown that we could be partnering with, and thinking about what the future of sustainable green manufacturing that creates good jobs for our communities is, could be a real opportunity for our city here.
Okay. And Dan, it's got to be super quick because I want to go to Nat.
Okay, I'll just say that we need ballot measure accountability. I think that we confuse people when we say that we know exactly what the voters wanted. Voters wanted police accountability. They wanted clean air. So they say yes on these things, but the details aren't revealed to the voters. And then the activists that brought it to us then tell us what those details were. That's not fair. We're manipulating voters. And so we need to be more accountable as city council, that we tell them what the North Star is, of course, but we also provide what success looks like, and we have measurable goals. And then we look at those every few years to see if we're on track.
Great, thank you. Nat, thank you for being patient.
Sure.
What are your thoughts regarding just the city's budget issues, revenue streams, and you can throw in PSEF there?
Yeah, like so many of these questions, we all have good ideas, and I think mine is just a collection of a lot of other folks' ideas. I agree with, I think what Tiffany mentioned, no new taxes. You shouldn't say read my lips, but I think that was the same sort of concept there. One thing that I practiced at Reverend Nat's Hard Cider was this, we call it zero-based budgeting. I'm not sure if that's a popular term or not, but it just means every time you create a budget, you start essentially from scratch, as if you were building a budget for the first time, or a pro forma invoice. So you're deciding which programs are going to get you towards your goals, not necessarily which programs you had last year. Of course, you didn't always start from zero, because there were multi-year initiatives that were really important to continue. But it's more of a concept about how you build budgets, as opposed to just sort of perpetuating the budgets again. So I'd like to figure out if that's something that bureaus can adopt. I think Ilana was talking about like spending money to save money in the long run. There's a pretty great example right now of the Columbia Park pool. There is currently, I think, a $4 and change million proposal to upgrade it with considerably and have it last for a very long time, versus a $100 million North Portland Aquatic Center. And obviously, North Portland Aquatic Center sound. Dan's got better numbers than I do. He's on that better than I am. But it's more politically sexy to open a new aquatic center than it is to keep an 80-year-old building. I'm not sure how old Columbia Park pool is. In addition to doing those zero-based budgeting, I think there is a lot of question about how we're spending money to get that maximum effect. I look forward to working with accountants such as James, or I always work with our accountants to learn what other people, maybe non-passionate, dispassionate individuals who are participating in the process, what they could come up with during our budgeting process. I'm a huge fan of maintenance. I've seen the benefits firsthand of spending money on maintenance and what it allows you to do later on, not just from a financial perspective, but from a ability to move rapidly because you have well-maintained infrastructure, well-maintained equipment. So that kind of leans towards the cause side of some of our budget challenges right now. One of the causes is sort of high spending, but another cause is low revenue. So a lot of the work that I will do ultimately, if I'm lucky enough to get on council, is to be creating more business opportunities, more economic growth, more housing, as we discussed, so that we can have more revenue, so that these tough questions that we're facing become a little bit less tough. Not saying, I said in the beginning, no new taxes, so it isn't about adding expenses, but it's about easing some of our budget question.
Great, thank you. And I think Ilana, you go first on this question. And basically, it's the city and county's relationship. Give me your thoughts in terms of why do you think that it has been so challenged for the past several years, and do you think that the city should be pulling out of the Joint Office of Homeless Services, for instance, or what would you want to see happen within the next year or so?
We absolutely should not pull out of the joint office when we are already struggling to build good relationships with our partner. Walking away from the table is not the way to solve anything. We certainly need to change what our relationships look like at the table. The city may need to come to the table with a different proposal, but we should not walk away from the table. Gosh, why are the relationships the way they are? I have spent my career working with people who I disagree with. I worked in the legislature for a long time, and I distinctly remember a time where I walked into a legislator's office who I disagree with on a lot of things to talk about an issue that I knew he would never vote for. And he said to me, "Why are you here? I'm not going to vote for this. And even if I wanted to, it would be political suicide in my district." And I said, "I'm not here to ask for your vote. I'm here because I think we're going to pass this policy. And when we do, it will affect your constituents. And I want it to work for them. So let's not talk about the ideology, right? Let's cut through the messaging. Let's talk about the policy and why the policy doesn't work for your folks and what we need to do to make better policy that will work for your communities." And I left that room with ideas on how to make better policy, because I was able to take a step back from ideology. And were I on council, I would sit down with my counterparts at the county and say, look, we might have different ways of approaching this. We have different values, different backgrounds, perhaps different constituencies, right? Our county commissioners have different looking districts than we will. But at the end of the day, we are all trying to make our community more safeable, more affordable, more safe, more resilient, more sustainable for folks who live here. So how are we doing that? And there's been a breakdown. I don't know if it's a breakdown in a communication or a breakdown in relationship, but when I see folks on both sides running to you all before they run to each other when there are differences, that is a breakdown in relationships that we cannot afford when we both have limited resources to solve the same problems. I don't know what caused it. I'm not in the room, but I know what I would do to make sure it doesn't continue.
Thank you very much. Tiffany, what are your thoughts about the relationship with the county, and would you opt for pulling the city out of the partnership?
So I don't opt for pulling us out of the partnership. What I opt for is us figuring out how we can better collaborate and work together and solve the issues that the public is asking us to solve and that we know that we need to solve. I have a longer history. I grew up in a time where the county and the city worked very well together. I remember when Mayor Wheeler was Chair Wheeler, and I worked on Sam Adams' education team, and we collaborated to create good education policy and opportunities for youth. One of them being the internship program, which I have since expanded and now manage, bringing youth on to work for the city in the summer. So, and there's a list of things. I work with the county's office now. I think what happened is maybe a breakdown in relationships. How I was taught, there's no friends or enemies in politics, there's only issues. And so it is up to the people in leadership to work collaboratively and address the issues. And so I'm thinking there maybe was a little frenemy or something of that nature, which got in the way of people really centering the needs of the people. And as elected officials, that just cannot happen. This is not your world. This is not your friends or who you choose to go out to dinner with, not go out to dinner. You are working on behalf of the people. And that is something that my whole career I have clearly understood. And, we may not always agree, and that's okay. What is really important is how do you work toward it and get to the solution that is being required to serve the people in the community. And I understand that all too well. So
Thank you. Dan, would appreciate your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I have a couple. So first of all, the focus for me is on the unhoused and those impacted by the humanitarian crisis on our streets. I was asked by Mayor Wheeler in September of 2020, right after I was sworn in, to be the liaison to the county. So I did a little research. 2016, Charlie Hells, the Mayor Hells, and Chair Kafori made an agreement. The city has always been the major donor to the county who runs the Office of Homeless Services. So we're basically a major donor to these efforts. It's not a joint office, it should be renamed. And so my point is then after SHS was passed in the spring of 2020, suddenly there was a largesse of funds that came in. A lot of money has come in, and that comes through Metro to the county. I'll never forget my first meeting when I assumed, because again, I voted for moving people into shelter. A lot of us did. We voted yes on that. So I get to the first meeting thinking we could talk about the concept of Safe Rest Villages, which are the same as task sites now. And I was told, no, this is all about housing. So I was introduced to the Housing First Coalition, which was very firmly established. So if you want to say who started this, look at me in the face and say I did, because I was a big part of that. I had the audacity, because I ran for office because my brother died on the streets in 2014, homeless with a heroin addiction, that I knew it was a messed up system. I was instantly exposed to that when I found out also that the mental health and behavioral health people were not at the table. I played nice as long as I could, and I kept telling the truth about the fact that we need to be more urgent about getting people into shelter with services, and kept getting hit with it's about housing first. Look who's not endorsing me. It's all the people that are behind the nonprofits that it's about housing first, and in my opinion, housing only. And this should be about services first, getting results, getting people stable, getting them into the workforce, big picture, having them going from being dependent on government to being independent and back and enjoying life again. That's the goal. And so I don't think this tension we're currently experiencing is bad, Portland. It's stop playing nice and think that it's just all about getting along and continue to watch our money go down the drain while we're not getting the results that we want. So I think it's great right now that there's a 50-50 split basically between the county board and the current city council about this. It's about time we had this adult tension in the room. A lot of cities that have that type of confidence move forward with this type of tension. You meet each other on the edges and move forward. It's not about me getting my own way. It's just about breaking down a system that has not been working. So I think, as somebody that had parents who divorced each other twice in middle school, I will just say when I hear that metaphor that divorce is bad, actually it was the best thing for the kids because I had focused time with each parent. Everything was fine. So each entity can play a different role and get better results. Maybe the city takes on the shelters. Maybe we're the first response system. And then we queue people up for stable housing with services with the county. So this whole notion that we have to just sign the dotted line because success is getting along doesn't resonate with me. What resonates with me is results for this crisis that has been too delayed because we've been playing nice and we've allowed the county to control the entire system. I'm just representing 80% of the people whose doors I knock on and are encouraging me to keep it up. So I'm going to keep up the fight until we get this right. It's a dual partnership and we've been used for too long.
Thank you very much. Nat, your thoughts about the collaboration or relationship between the city and county?
Yeah, I'm not I hope I won't have to vote for stay in or stay out right away on January 2nd. There's obviously a lot more to learn, and I appreciate Commissioner Ryan's perspective on it. Um, I think that there's a few reasons why it's a very common thing that I hear from voters, like why is the county and city's relationship so bad? I think structurally, the current commission form of government makes it real tough to uh to focus on things that really matter to the city overall. There's a lot of inability to work on topics that aren't in your bureau. So I really look forward to the new change in government. I think it's not surprising that we continue to have commissioners and mayors who don't get reelected oftentimes in Portland because the job is just really set up to fail, I think. Beyond structure, I think there's some personality questions. We want to make sure that we're hiring people into this job who are cool and thoughtful, who maybe don't have political legacies to try to preserve. I see that at the county sometimes. People maybe not be interested in the actual problem. They're more interested in preserving who they are, don't take credit for things. But I also think there's a question of just taking action on things. And I think when you make meaningful progress on some of these issues, the question of dysfunction kind of goes away because that's sort of the definition of being functional. So Commissioner Ryan obviously saw a ton of dysfunction at the joint office and he took action to create the Safe Rest Villages, which is awesome. And that wasn't necessarily in the agreement, but it's proven to be a complete success. So I imagine how much voters would complain about homelessness if there weren't those Safe Rest Villages right now. Just those seven, all right, I think seven villages. Specifically, so with regards to the joint office, it was set up without any metrics. Mr. Ryan mentioned that it was just here's some money, and that's kind of wild. I have a shelter first model, which is not housing first. We need to get people into a place where we can count them, where we know where they are, so that we can provide services. Because there should be no services without shelter, and there should be no shelter without services. That's good.
Great, thank you. And I'm sorry, Dan, but because we're running real short on time, I want to go to James and then just have one wrap-up question. So James, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think the headline tomorrow, if I heard that correctly, that was Dan Ryan takes credit for dysfunction between. No, what frustrates me is, with all due respect to Commissioner Ryan, his tone was the similar tone that I heard Commissioner Beeson during his speech opening of the the Arbor Lodge shelter on Lombard and Denver. That's a low barrier shelter that's going to bring in over 100 of our most at-risk residents directly into North Portland. And when I look at this, I don't really care if they get along. I care if the providers of this county-run shelter have a working relationship with the city infrastructure that they're going to need to be successful. As part of my outreach in the St. John's community, I developed a relationship with the CEO of Do Good Multnomah, and we've been working together on ways that we can both advocate for their opening an Arbor Lodge and also a day shelter in the St. John's community. And one of the biggest questions that comes up from residents is, well, what happens with directly outside your shelters? They're going to be, significant camping increasing? Is there going to be drug use? And I asked Daniel, I said, so what is your role there? What is the county's role? And he essentially said, as soon as someone steps foot on the sidewalk, that's out of my purview. That becomes the city's role. So when I show up to the Arbor Lodge grand opening and I see essentially no one from the city that's there participating, that's there championing it, I have real concerns about that relationship between the city and the county. And that's the one I'm focused on. And when I look at what I've been doing for the years that I've been advocating in these small business communities, it's building relationships with the people that are actually getting the work done and trying to make sure that we have working relationships. So many times in my career as a small business owner, I've had times when I wanted to scream at patients or employees, and you just don't get to do that. That's not what leadership looks like. It's about building relationships. It's about fostering just positive work environment. And I think we need to see a lot more of that coming from this new council and our city leaders.
Thank you. So for the last question, it's just pretty short. I'm going to, and Tiffany, you'll be first on this. Basically, my question is, there are more than 100 people running for some office in Portland. And what defines you, or what is your best policy idea attribute or experience that you bring that no one else brings? Why should you be one of the 12? And Tiffany, if you can go first.
So again, voters have elected me twice to the PCC Board of Directors. And again, like I said, I'm proud that during my time, we've opened up the 42nd Avenue Opportunity Center that includes affordable housing and daycare. And we're looking at more projects like this. I've also, as board chair, I co-led the collaborative effort to pass the bond to modernize PCC's offerings to our students, and I oversaw the executive search of the first woman president of the school. I have experience in creating and approving policy, budgets, and creating metrics and goals that define accountability. I've served on several community organization boards, achieving milestones that improve the lives of our families and children, such as my role on Kairos PDX board chair. I have co-led and approved organizational redesign that created new positions and reporting structures, improving accountability and results. In my work at the city, I have consistently identified new ways to work across bureaus and improve communication. I focus on creating policies and programs that address our city's operational needs, creating opportunities for small businesses, expanding opportunities for youth, paid internships, and creating processes and programs that focus on workforce development, recruitment, hiring, and retention. I know how challenging it can be to make change within the city, but I also know how to get things done because I have a track record that proves it. I'm committed to the city that I was born and raised in, and in my life's work has been a reflection of that commitment. I would be honored to have your support and vote.
Great, thank you very much. Dan, same question for you. I guess why should you be one of the 12?
Yeah, I think I've proven that I'm very passionate about serving the people, and I'll always do whatever it takes to make sure that the voices that I hear, not just when door knocking, but for the last 5 years, are always in my heart. And so a little bit earlier, you heard some of that because I wanted to set the record straight. This is not about fighting. It's about advocating for results. And when we have systems internally that have failed for years, someone's got to advocate for the people that are asking for us to change and to improve. And so I'll always be that person that does that. I'm experienced. I have results. It wasn't easy to build the Safe West Villages. I did get a 5-0 vote in the city. I did get Chair Kafoury to approve it, but boy, there was a lot of resistance. And I also got the permitting up and running and got 4 people into the budget, which is the only reason why it got to the finish line. And now we have to see that through. And so, and when it comes to the arts, I had the audacity to call out that we didn't have any financial constraints. Everything I've done, I was warned when defunding the police, stopping the defunding the police, same thing. Everyone politically warned me, Dan, you're picking too many fights with the special interest of this city. And I said, well, it's probably about time that someone represents the voters, the majority of the voters who don't have time to go to all these meetings and advocate. So as a lifelong Portlander, as somebody that was grateful to move back home back in 95 and got a second chance at life with the new meds that came out, and now is happily married in Arbor Lodge, I'm just ready to represent my hometown within the city and be an experienced leader amongst whoever I get to serve with and build a city council that's focused on common sense. I'm finally experiencing that the last 2 years, and I don't want to go back to the ideology that really produced no results, some good speeches, but not a lot of results. So I'm looking forward to that. It's go time, Portland.
Thank you very much. Nat, why should you be one of the 12? What do you bring?
Yeah, I have a lot of small business backgrounds. City of Portland is a city of small businesses. We love our small businesses, not just for the economics that they provide, but for the cultural magnet. Why should we stay in Portland? Why should we move to Portland? Why should businesses expand in Portland? A lot of that has to do with our small business community. I've also blended a lot of altruism with my company as well, donated over $280,000 worth of cash and cider over a dozen of years to many, many dozens of groups in the city. That support that I provided to the community has come back to me in endorsements across the ideological spectrum. I have endorsements from the business community, and I have endorsements from, for instance, climate justice groups. I'm also highly collaborative. I touched on that earlier. I think it's really important that we create a great team of 3, team of 12 in order to get things done. I learned this professional collaborative nature operating in the beer industry. One of the reasons why Portland has the best beer in the country is because we're an incredibly collaborative group. We always help each other, loaning equipment, offering expertise, et cetera. And I think this is the most important one. We've never had a public transit operator on city council, and I hope to be the first one.
Great. Thank you very much. James.
Yeah, I think when we look at this new movement to the districts, I think I bring a really unique perspective from someone who's all 3 of my businesses are spread out across the district. So a very on the ground kind of knowledge of how the city affects both a business owner, a resident, community member. I've helped run the Alberta Street Fair. I've also had my businesses broken into more times than I can count. I've seen kind of how we approach small business, as Nat said. I've seen the successes, and I've seen a lot of the frustrations that come with that. When it looks issues with PBOT, I know what it's like to have the street ripped up in front of you right before your summer opens up, with basically no communication coming towards the business owners. So I think I could be a very strong voice for the community, really kind of embrace the district representation model of the new system. And then I think I also have the unique added kind of resume attribute of the forensic accounting. There's no question that that's a big issue for voters right now, this feeling that we're not getting the payback for what we're spending. And I have a 15 years plus of experience kind of getting into some pretty complex financial issues, dealing with misappropriation of funds. Not to say that there's any of that in the city of Portland, but I'd be excited to put that to work for the community. It would be extremely humbling to be able to represent this community, and I've just been enjoying this process so much. So
thank you very much. And Ilana.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I'm running because I want Portland to work. I want this new system to work. And frankly, I don't think Portlanders are interested in giving us a second chance if this first council can't get together and both address the many interconnected challenges our current council has been working on, while also starting to give people a reason to invest in our city again, a real picture of where we're headed and what future Portland could do. I bring both the background building coalitions, working with community, and bringing people into policymaking, and also the hard work of writing policies, building majorities, building budgets, and getting things done on the ground. I'm the candidate who can bring a new perspective to City Hall and who also has the experience to bring people together and actually turn ideas into policies that can work. And look, I know, Portland, that support is earned here. It's not given, and I hope to earn yours.
Thank you so much, everyone. This was really a fantastic conversation. Really appreciate your time and everything you brought to it. We'll be in touch if we have any additional questions. Hopefully we'll be coming out with endorsements in another week or probably 2 weeks, actually. But thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you, everyone.